We're very happy as Companion.energy to be able to host a webinar together with Mark and Marcon. I will let the introduction of themselves, their role and their company to them. But the topic of today is about telecommunication companies, the energy transition, and how they navigate it, basically. So we will now do some intros and then run through a couple of quite pivotal energy management concepts, such as risk hedging. And then Mark, as well as Marcon, will share a couple of thoughts related to those concepts. And then we can all ask some questions, of course. All the attendees can post your questions in the chat, and I'll be happy to moderate some at the end of the discussions. So maybe in terms of intro, Marcon, maybe you can start with an intro of yourself, brief intro about KPN. I think the audience will know the company, but still could be good to highlight in a few sentences and what your role is.
Yeah, perfect. My name is Mark. I'm working at KPN, which is the Dutch telecom operator, offering fixed and mobile services. I'm working in a department that's called Sustainability and Energy, and my role is energy consultant. And one of the focus projects for this year is what can we do with battery energy storage?
That's an exciting focus project. Mark?
Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Mark. I'm a strategy and innovation manager at Proximus, the Belgian national telco operator. I'm working in the network business unit, which encompasses our network activities in fiber, mobile, and fixed. And I'm focusing on energy and energy challenges. With my contributions, I try to help Proximus in navigating market volatility, optimizing costs, and enhancing cost transparency in the energy domain.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Marcon. Maybe to briefly, before we go into the different topics and share some opinions, maybe to frame some of the energy management objectives already. Mark, you mentioned a couple. What we see as main objectives for telecommunication companies is similar to other companies related to energy. We are in the energy transition, so everyone is working towards more and more renewable energy, but renewable energy is still in development. It comes with some risks. It's not always there. It's pretty weather dependent. And telco companies are usually quite critical in terms of network infrastructure and have a public nature. We see cost efficiency, also cost predictability and risk management, but then also at the same time moving towards more and more renewables as one of the core objectives that any telco basically in Europe, but I think beyond as well, has these days. As such, we listed a couple of topics that would like each of your opinions on, or a bit your point of view and how you see the domain evolving. Maybe Mark, because you mentioned the risk management. If I say hedging, what comes to mind with you, and how do you see this topic for telco these days?
Hedging plays a significant role in achieving our energy management objectives by providing price stability and reducing exposure to market risks and enabling better financial planning, which is of course key for a stock listed company like Proximus, because we are confronted with, like other telcos, with tight profit margins, and it helps in maintaining our financial predictability.
Well, okay. Maybe you can jump in. Hedging, it can be done in many different shapes and forms. Of course, you can hedge on calendar year products on the market, typically over the counter with your energy supplier. Of course, when you contract some renewable energy, there's a seasonality involved, which might trigger the need to hedge more in some periods of the year and hedge less in other periods of the year. Is this a concept you're familiar with, or that you're also working on with KPN?
Yes, definitely. If you look to the past, it's different than what we are going to do in the future. So one big difference is, let's say a telco has, if you look at the energy consumption, we really have a flat profile. So we can really predict, even on hourly base, what we will consume. So before, if you already, let's say, do some hedging on beforehand, 3 years before, 2 years before, you can just build up layer by layer, and you can really easy match in the end your volume that you will consume. But to the future, it will be different. As KPN, we now have agreed on two PPAs, one wind PPA and one solar PPA. We know roughly the year volume, but we don't know on hourly base, because the PPA is on hourly base, what will be the actual wind and solar generation at that time. So it's now a lot more complicated to on beforehand hedge your energy, because you don't know what will be the actual. So let's say all flat layers and build it up. That's not the strategy anymore. That cannot be the strategy anymore. So we have to see to seasonal patterns. Do you do a quarterly or monthly or some other product that you can, let's say, build a better hedging strategy than before? Before you could always do it with your eyes closed, and to be more green and to say match your PPAs, you have to be more smart and adaptive.
And keep the eyes open.
I guess
Maybe Malcolm just said like the predictability of telco demand patterns. Indeed, on the short term, they're pretty predictable. I heard that there's a couple of mega trends as well that do have some changes on, but that's more on an annual basis, such as fiber rollout, such as transition to 5G with the antennas and the mobile network. How do you see such evolution and the related predictability?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Mark, I saw you want to answer.
it's a difficult question because linked to the hedging just mentioned by Marcon, in the past you had windows of 1 to 3, 4 years with the classical hedging. When going to PPAs, you go for longer periods of time, 10, 15, 20 years, which means that, of course, you can calculate the cost for the long-term projects, but you need to balance this opportunity with missing out on short-term opportunities in the market as well. And when referring to mobile, for example, we do know more or less what 5G consumption will be in the next years, but then there will be 6G and 7G. And we have no clue what it will mean over a period of 15 to 20 years with respect to energy consumption. Same goes for, we're phasing out copper at the moment, which is energy poor, and replacing it by fiber. So you see a lot of shifts ongoing. We are evolving more to cloud-based activities. So this forecasting on long term of actual energy consumption is a challenge. And in all transparency, we don't have cracked the code yet.
Imaginable. I think on the long term, it's very difficult, and the world changes as well. Companies change. So it's predictions on such long time horizons are, I think, always difficult. I know, Marcon, whether you have some additional thoughts on that point.
Yeah, for, let's say for us, it's similar. But what is that? If you look at the broad spectrum, we expect a decrease on our fixed access. So copper phase out, etc. What we're working on. Fiber is a lot more, especially if you go to PON, is a lot less energy per consumer. A mobile, we expect to increase and to be even more volatile during the day due to traffic patterns. Future will tell us what goes quicker, the decrease of fixed or the increase of mobile. But in the end, we still are aiming for a total decrease of energy consumption. But indeed, if you have for 15-year a PPA, like Mark said, which we actually have, it can be, let's say, a challenge in the future how to react on that. And you don't want to have that you always have to sell your energy, because that's also not. Yes, we have to keep our eyes open and maybe adjust something here and there.
Yeah. You mentioned PPAs, and also that with KPN, you're involved in a couple of them. You mentioned that you both have a solar and a wind PPA. Was that a conscious choice to mix these different sources, and why did you do that?
Yeah, the mix is there because, let's say, wind is, let's say, all year there can be wind, but we see that in summer, the average wind, let's say, in summer period is a little bit less than in winter periods. Also, in summer periods, our consumption is actually higher because the seasonal impact on our consumption is from cooling. So we actually need more energy in summer periods. And solar is, let's say, the peak is in summer. So it was a natural match, let's say. So on seasonal patterns, it's a match made in heaven. But in the end, you, of course, if you look at the hourly numbers, and there will be the challenge.
Yeah. We mentioned the topic of the long term versus the short term and looking at annual evolutions and then hourly profiles. We mentioned that before. If maybe a concept that's related to these more short term evolutions is the topic of arbitrage. Mark, arbitrage, what does that ring a bell, or how does that come to mind?
It does ring a bell, of course. It involves buying electricity during periods of low demand and low prices, and then using it or storing for use during peak demands when prices are higher. And this, of course, can be a means of cost optimization because when you purchase at a lower price and use it during peak demand periods, there are savings linked to this. But even more important, I think, is the fact that arbitrage can actually boost the use of renewable energies. Because by storing excess energy produced during periods with higher renewable generation during noon in the summer, for example, with solar, or in the winter at evenings with wind, we can maximize utilization of those renewable energy sources. And this not only supports our sustainability goals, but also helps in achieving the high returns by distributing this energy efficiently to the grid.
And we, as Companion.energy, we work with a couple of telcos, but we also work with industrial needs. And we work, for instance, with some industrial companies that have batch manufacturing and that have, for instance, buffered cooling and heat. There, it's very easy to imagine for many that you delay a couple of processes here and there without severely affecting your operations. But in telecommunications, that's a bit different, right? Because if Marcon says, I want to save some money, I shut down the network for a while, you cannot call. I think a lot of customers will be angry, but there's also just critical communication systems of countries running on this. So I guess discovering or maximizing or volume that you can shift and do some arbitrage with is rather limited by nature for a telco, or how do you see that?
Indeed, also our consumption is rather flat, as Marcon said. The only things we can steer on, but it's very limited, are chargers, which we have on our facilities, and the buildings, the office buildings and the shops, which over time are evolving towards more and more heat pumps. But at the moment, there is very little we can do. The most apt for using arbitrage are, in fact, the mobile cell towers, because they have a fluctuating demand. There is a seasonality. There's also during the day, in the morning and evenings, is a higher consumption. And there would be a potential to combine this with batteries, but there's still food for thought at the moment.
Yeah. Marcon, you mentioned that batteries is a topic that you're working on a lot. Can you share some, you don't need to share any details, but can you share some thoughts on that topic of batteries and telcos and flexibility of the consumption profiles?
Yes, of course. Let's say what you said about buffer, you're correct. We cannot shift our load. We cannot say between 1 and 3, there is no internet because the prices are high or something like that. So we are really looking into other types of buffer. Can you maybe do something with your cooling, but that seems to be very limited and complicated. Can you use other buffers? And then, of course, batteries is the most step one thought that we have. And that's something that you hear and read a lot about. So we are looking at what can batteries do to help us to be more sustainable, because if our PPAs, wind and solar together are at their peak, we have too much energy. So then we would like to store it in the battery for later. Of course, you can use it for arbitrage, but it can also help. And that is what we are facing in the Netherlands, at least. A lot of locations are affected by local congestion. Let's call it challenges. I would say problems, but let's call them challenges. So a battery can also help on that. So we are looking at, okay, where do we need a battery that can locally help us? And of course, a battery is not 24/7 needed to solve a congestion problem. So can we utilize the battery on other moments during the day or in a season to be more green and to, let's say, improve our energy procurement?
Yeah. Yeah, that's mechanisms that often referred to as value stacking, where indeed the battery is not always fully occupied by doing the same job, be it grid congestion or grid services, price arbitrage, or maximizing the renewables. So indeed, it's about choosing which times are best to valorize your battery with a certain mechanism. Indeed, I guess in the Netherlands, there's a bigger, let me say, opportunity on grid management or decongestion. In Belgium, it's less of an urgent issue, I think, Mark, but we do have lots of evolutions in the grid services markets, and that can also offer some opportunities for generating revenue through stability, flexibility, right?
Indeed, in Belgium, grid congestion is less of an urgent topic, but it's something which is about to happen in the not so long future. And that's why, for example, the distribution net operator in the north of Belgium is launching a trial in offering an additional market of supporting services to stabilize the grids. It's been just kicked off in I think 1 week or two, 1 month ago, I think. And this is something we're also looking at. Can we help support the grids in the north of the country by offering, for example, battery capacity or other services in exchange, of course, for a reward?
Yeah. Okay. And how do you think about the combination? I guess there's a whole analysis and optimization that needs to happen to just calculate what you need to do when. But then you just mentioned the distribution system operator. There's also a lot of actors involved in the field, also your energy supplier, I think. How do you see working together on this with your suppliers?
Good question. Of course, when you want to really engage in those ancillary services, you need to have a contract which allows you to do. And at this moment, we are discussing with our energy supplier to launch a POC to see if we can carve out part of our actual contract to test if we can actually be profitable and get some learnings on a small scope. Because also the energy suppliers at this moment are not ready to really engage in this type of activities with us. So it's a bit of learning of two sides, and we need to do this in a co-learning, a cooperation mode before we take actual decision to go this full-fledged.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think there's some fundamentals making you not always the easiest customers, such as also the different meters. Like telcos usually have thousands and thousands of meter points, which makes it also hard for suppliers to keep track of everything and also to roll out these innovations. But we see there as well lots of evolutions and also willingness of the market to work together with companies like you on this. We talked about grid services, we talked about renewables and PPAs, about flexibility. Mark, on a topic where we see all of that often coming together is in so-called hourly renewable energy matching, or we already made some jokes about it in the past. There's 100 different names for that. There's carbon-free energy, there's 24/7 matching. But I think overall, there's a big trend towards following up in more detail when you are effectively covered by how much renewable energy in your consumption. Can you share a couple of?
Yes, of course. That is also what we are going for. So we want to really on hourly base see how green we are. We indeed have the term 24/7 carbon-free energy. And that's also the way the PPAs are built up. But that's also how we in the future want to also track how are we doing, not only on let's say the carbon-free energy, but also on our hedging and energy bill. And what I think is also important, because in the previous question, you asked about your energy provider. If you're going to do such thing, for instance, experiment with batteries, you want to be sure that what you gain on the one hand, you're more green, or you save some money, or you earn some money because you contribute to a balancing market. you want to be sure that on the other hand, you do not interfere in a negative way with your energy contract. So whatever you're gonna do, you really have to do it hand in hand with your energy provider. And I'm not saying do everything with your energy provider only, but at least mutually work on it, because otherwise you think you are doing something good, but if on the other hand you are punished, then it doesn't make any sense. So the whole picture needs to, all the puzzle pieces have to fit together.
Yeah, I got a remark in the chat that someone saying that over the energy crisis, the relationship between companies and energy suppliers was often a bit difficult, related to lots of risk premiums being asked. And the person says that now this topic of flexibility is again a topic where large companies and their energy suppliers can come closer together again to generate benefits collaboratively, because there is indeed a risk. I agree that that you do certain flexibilization of assets or certain active steering. But then if your energy supplier upstream doesn't take that into account in the way they trade their portfolio, you can, as you rightfully said, Marcon, with something you think is positive, have a negative effect somewhere else in the value chain. Okay, great. This topic of risk premiums, I guess that there's a couple of risks embedded in energy markets and contract prices, like imbalance risks, profile risks. Again, being able to work together on those with your energy suppliers or with other companies can be an important driver of delivering savings. How, for instance, do you see this evolving? And Marcon, you mentioned already being able to have utility bills on a very deep granularity. Do you see this whole energy management practice for telcos moving towards something which is more detailed, which is more analytical, or am I just speaking for my own shop here?
In the Belgian market, we do see a trend that energy suppliers are trying more and more to balance the risk towards the customer. And in the past, we paid a risk premium to mitigate all those risks you mentioned. But more and more, we do see that, and it's also linked to the rise of renewables, that suppliers tend to balance this towards us. And managing those risks becomes a critical element to assess the investment case, for example, for long-term renewable projects like PPA. As I mentioned before, this financial stability we need in the context of an evolving energy landscape and unpredictable market conditions is crucial for us. It's a balance on trying to define an agreement with the supplier and of course with internal risk management, where you want to position ourselves. And that's not an easy exercise because we need to balance the cost benefit versus the risk we're willing to take, and not an easy one.
Yeah. Maybe a question to Marcon. Mark just mentioned in the cost aspect. Is there also a revenue aspect to this energy management point of view? Of course, with batteries, you can generate some income from grid services, but do you see telco customers being interested in energy services from a telco? There are some known examples where telco suppliers are also collaborating, for instance, with energy suppliers, or are rolling out customer offerings. How do you see that? Is there an interest, you think, from the market in combined telco and renewable energy offerings?
Let's say department I'm in is really focused internally, or let's say what we think for external possibilities. I don't have any info on that, but I think a telecom company or energy company, in the end, it's all related. You can see traditionally your both in Holland now, energy and grid operators are a little bit split, but traditionally you're both a grid operator that sell a service, and the one sell energy and the other one sell telecom and data. So I think there are a lot of similarities also on that. Only energy is more volatile, so maybe a little bit more risky and unknown for a telecom company, but I can really see that a combination could benefit. It is not something that we as KPN offer, but I really think it is something as a telco that you can look at to combine. Yeah.
Okay, great. I have the same opinion. We are already at just over half the hour, so I want to thank you a lot for your contributions, Mark and Marcon. Something to share is that with Companion.energy, we work sometimes with telcos, and we like to work with telcos. Something we published actually this weekend is a paper on how we see the different value drivers related to energy management. So I would encourage, or I will send to any of the registered people, send it along, but would be keen to receive, of course, all your feedback on it. So to everyone that attended, thanks a lot. And again, to Mark and Marcon, thanks a lot for sharing your insights during this short webinar.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. You're right.
Talk soon.
Thanks for inviting.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.